What is your scariest home alone story? Serious. The other night I'm asleep in my apartment. I hear my front door open but just figure it's my sister coming over to crash on my couch. BC she got in a fight with her boyfriend. Happens sort of regularly. She's the only one with a key to my apartment. I heard her moving around and figured she was just getting settled and making something to eat. I go back to sleep and think nothing of it. Wake up the next morning for work, and she's not there. Weird since it was 5 a.m. So I text and ask if she came over. She says no. I check my doors and the door to the outside I rarely use was left unlocked. Edit, nothing was stolen either, but maybe BC all of my electronics I have sitting out aren't worth much of anything. I was 14. It was an average night. Around 9 p.m. Me and my little cousin are at his house. I'm babysitting for the night while my mom and aunt are shopping and my dad and uncle are at the movie theater. So we're sitting there and I was feeling really strange. Something was wrong but I couldn't put my finger on it, so I just kept watching TV with my cousin. The feeling wasn't going away, so I got up and walked to the back door to lock it. When I came back through the kitchen I saw what was causing my weird feeling. In the window there was a very decrepit and homeless looking man, just staring into the window, looking at my cousin. Protective mode turned on. I pretended like I didn't see the guy and I told my little cousin that we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon and they wouldn't want him to be staying up late. So I went upstairs and put him to bed, knowing damn well that there was a man outside that wanted in. I was about 125 pounds and 5'8" at the time and I played football for my school. If I remember correctly, I went downstairs and straight into the kitchen and grabbed one of those meat tenderizing hammers. Turned back to the window where I saw him before. Not there. Ran back to the front door and checked that it was locked. Both the deadbolt and the knob were locked. Ran back upstairs with my meat tenderizer and went into my cousin's room and sat down in front of the door. He asked me what I was doing and I said that he didn't need to worry about it and that he should keep his head low. Called the cops and then my dad and uncle. Cops would take half an hour and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I hear a window shatter and the sound of heavy boots walking around on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers and to keep silent. I could hear the guy walking around downstairs. It was horrifying. I gripped that damn meat tenderizer and waited. About 5 minutes pass and then I hear the boots walking upstairs. At this point I was having a freaking heart attack. My cousin's door is no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I heard him opening the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. He walked back downstairs and I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later the police showed up and burst into the house. Turned out the guy was loose from a mental hospital 1 province away. TLDR, I nearly had to battle a mental case when I was 14. At one point I was no more than a wooden door and 10 feet away from him. Friend at the family was enjoying coffee on his back porch in the morning, when he says a large unkept male emerged from the tree line. The guy proceeds to bolt towards the house in a menacing way. My friend lives alone, and often uses his backyard as a gun range. As the man from the trees is charging toward the house, my friend bolts all the doors and calls the police. Unbeknownst to my friend, the guy had actually broken the day before via a basement window and squatted there the night before. The guy had left the basement door unlocked and at this point was making his way up the stairs towards my friend. My friend has his house security gun aimed at the guy who is now coming down the hallway. He fires the first round, which is rock salt, and the guy isn't phased. Next was a rubber bullet to the chest. Yet the guy was clearly out of his mind and still coming down the hallway. The third shot, I'm not sure if it was buckshot or a slug or if he was using a rifle, but the third shot left a hole in this guy's chest. The guy was still coming at him. Apparently he was a pretty massive guy, but he still wrestled my friend to the ground. But the injury caught up to him and he died on top of my friend. Meanwhile, the operator had heard the entire exchange between the two, which more or less amounted to, "Stop or I'll shoot, and shoot me mofo." Cops were there soon and it made local papers. There was some sort of criminal investigation, but my friend was eventually cleared. Turns out the intruder had escaped from a mental hospital a few days before from Baltimore and made his way 50-odd miles up the road into some rural country. I haven't talked to the friend of a friend, only his parents, since the ordeal. But fuck, I imagine that messed him up a bit, considering the guy had obviously slept for at least one night in his basement. I was living in a split-level duplex with my ex, 4 cats, and a foster black lab mix. The cats never went in the lower level family room that I made an office/exercise room, bedroom, and laundry/bathroom. And the dog hated being down there. I always had a feeling of being watched, but I chalked it up to there being windows at street level since it was a daylight basement. I had 2 weird experiences, but only the second one qualifies for Home Alone. I'll include the first for context. The first one, I figured it was just my imagination getting the best of me since I didn't like being downstairs. I was doing laundry with my headphones in. My ex was upstairs gaming and completely oblivious to anything going on around him. As I was putting my clothes in to wash, I heard someone snapping their fingers in my ear, like they were next to me and trying to get my attention. No one was there. For the second experience, my ex and half our animals were out of the house for the day visiting his family in nearby big city. I was downstairs printing off some coupons since it was the early aughts and I didn't have a smartphone. I heard the front door unlock, open and close, and heard feet on the landing. I called out, "Hey, you're back early." Since, well, who else could it be? I walked to the bottom of the stairs, expecting to see my ex on the landing with a very excited dog and two very annoyed cats, but there was no one there. No one parked in the driveway. No one parked in the road. No one was home at the neighbors. The cats were upstairs and perfectly uninterested. I called my ex and he was still in big city and slightly freaked out when I told him what I heard. He raced back and we decided that if he left again, he should leave the dog since he seemed to be sensitive and would make me feel safer. I've never had auditory hallucinations before or since. I was chilling in my friend's apartment alone. We lived in a duplex. He was on the top floor and I was on the bottom. I was playing some Xbox when I hear something huge come through the front door into the kitchen. So I got up to see who was there. We threw huge parties all the time, so it wasn't really that odd for some random to just show up. But then I saw this fucker. A huge hulking country boy in overalls with a huge kitchen knife just looking at me standing in the kitchen. I might have said something, but I promptly noped the fuck out of a side door, ran into my apartment and locked all the doors. I don't remember who I called or exactly what happened, but I know I waited until I couldn't hear anyone moving around upstairs anymore and crept back in. Big guy was passed out on the couch. Turns out he was on parole for domestic abuse charges, had gotten super sauce downtown, and made it to the apartment where he used to live, where I, a tiny ass 18-year-old, was just playing some Black Ops 2 smoking weed. In my 20s I shared a house with a friend. He worked night shifts and I would time my Pornhub use around that. One night I'm watching a video with the sound up, thinking I was alone, and I heard an unmistakable female voice outside of my door saying hello. I thought maybe it was my friend's girlfriend, so I turned the video off and walked outside the room to do some damage control. Only, no one was there. No one was home all but me. It was too soon for her to run out of the house, and I would have heard it if she had done so. Not really sure what happened that night, but part of me was relieved by the thought that it was just a ghost and not my friend's girlfriend catching me watching porn. Was home alone and maybe 12 years old. A really annoying boy from my neighborhood like me, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. My parents left to go somewhere and I was sleeping. I was woken up by the phone ringing. It was a prank phone call saying all sorts of nasty things they wanted to do to me. I just hung up. It was the mid-80s. As soon as I was back in my bedroom, unsettled by the call, this crappy boy knocked on my window and scared the living shit out of me. I've never been so happy to see my parents as I was that day. I'm a truck driver, so the truck is my home. Making this story count, right? Either way, I was parked for the night at a little gas station just outside of Pocatello. ID. For those not familiar with trucks, we have beds right behind the driver's seat, about where your back seat is in your car. I lock the doors every night, but this time I wake up to the doors cracked open and my wallet is scattered across the passenger seat. Cards are everywhere, but none are missing. I'm missing $20 cash, but nothing else. I cut my losses once I realized it was only the $20 missing. I'm not filling a police report over that. I get a few miles down the road and there's this sketchy drifter walking away from that gas station. I put 2 and 2 together, figured he was my culprit. I can get over the money, but the fact that that sketchy dude was inches away from me in my sleep out on the road, that haunts me to this day. Side note, a good trucker tip is to run your seatbelt through the door handles to prevent this. As a kid, I didn't want to go to a funeral of a close family friend. I stayed home and parents were pissed. Playing GTA 4 when I heard knocking at the door. Not thinking much about it, I go and open the door and no one's there. So I go back to playing. After 20 minutes I hear a louder, more desperate knock, and that one alarmed me and made me jump. I look out the window to see if anything, but nothing. I then open the door to get a better look and I see no one but an all-black German Shepherd staring at me from the other side of the fence. It trips me out but nothing to scare me. I go back to GTA 4 and after 10 minutes I hear banging and kicking at the door. That made me jump up and I go to my parents' room to grab my dad's gun. I then go check the window and the German Shepherd is on my side of the fence now in front my door just staring at it. I never stayed home alone as a kid ever again. Grown up now and I brought up this story to my dad and he started cackling. He told his friend to do that to me. I was pissed at first because it traumatized me, haha. Sorry if this is kinda long. Sorry for errors or anything. On mobile. Can't remember if I've posted this somewhere else before. Me and my older sibling, staying at home. Small town in Ohio with less people in it than my mom's graduating class of the city we came from. Sibling is grounded, both the house's phone and their own phone are locked in my dad's gun safe, which neither of us had the combination to. Reason for being grounded is something silly and arbitrary. Can't remember quite why. Grandparents live down the street. Great-grandmother lives in a small house they built her on the property so that she could be independent but they would still be close by. My parents said that they were going to go check on my great-grandmother, as my grandparents were out of town that day, and then they would come back and we would order pizza. That sounded good enough to 7-year-old me and 15-year-old sibling. We played video games for a while. starting to get hungry and wonder when my parents would be back. After about 2 hours of them being gone, I heard a knock on the door. I went downstairs, pretty excited for the food, and my sibling followed a bit behind after saving the game. Walked up to the door, which had a large window in it, and not my parents. Very tall, lean, white guy with some short black hair and scruffy facial hair. 24-25 years old? More jarring because everyone knew everyone in this small town, and I had no clue who this was. I held up my finger like 1 second and closed the curtain. I turned to see my sibling staring at the door, in a bit of disbelief because they had seen the person too. In seconds, knocking turned to pounding, turned to shaking and rattling our doorknob. Terrified and with no way to call our parents, my sibling grabbed my hand and ran me into the kitchen. They grabbed a knife, and I distinctly remember it breaking in their hand, and them grabbing a different one. We hid in the laundry room and held each other, hearing banging, pounding, and about 5 minutes that felt like hours later, the front door opening. One thing about my sibling is they have always been ready to protect me at a moment's notice, and they were ready to jump up with their shitty kitchen knife and defend me the moment the dude was upon us. Instead, my mom rounded the corner, holding 2 pizza boxes and wondering why her 2 kids were in a crumpled heap of tears on the floor. We both stood up and ran to tell her about the man outside, but we were met with laughter. My dad was outside talking to him. She said that he was asking about buying a broken down car that had been in our driveway for a few months, and was apparently a mechanic. My mom felt terrible, but found the situation a bit amusing. Apparently she went out and told the man, and he said he felt bad for scaring us. We were given hugs and promised that the phones wouldn't be locked away while they were gone again, and spent the evening eating our pizza with choked sobs. But something still bothers me, even though it didn't as a child. Something that I just never thought about. Why would an adult grown man pound on the door like that? Shake the handle, try his very damnedest to get into a house where either the parents weren't home, or the youngest child had held up their finger like 1 second to go get their parent? Why would someone want to talk about a car that didn't have any sort of for sale sign on it, so late at night? 9:10 p.m.? I'd like your opinion on if I was actually in danger that night, as my parents brushed it off so lightly, but something in my gut, being an adult now? That's not the way adults act, and I don't think that I would want to know what would have happened had my parents not come home when they did. Middle of the night, and some very drunk person with anger management issues couldn't figure out that they were at the wrong house and that their key wasn't going to open the door, and they were getting extremely and drunkenly frustrated. They finally gave up, but it was pretty creepy. It was persistent enough that it seemed like a good idea to finally follow through with the dog adoption we had already been considering. I was living in my first apartment alone in college in 2015. It was a Friday night and I was on Skype playing video games with friends. It was like midnight and there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw someone from my complex I had spoken to a few times on the other side of the door, looking nervous and scared. I opened the door but kept the door chains on and asked him what was going on. He told me someone was passed out on the stairs and looked sick, and he had heard me talking on my Skype call through the door, so he knocked on my door for help. I went out into the hall with him and he showed me the person passed out in the stairs. It was my across the hall neighbor. He was obviously very drunk. The other guy at the complex reached down to help him up and the neighbor pulled a messy swing at him. Missed completely. We talked him down and managed to get him up the stairs to his door. The drunk guy throwing sloppy swings every now and again at us. He took like 10 minutes finding the right key for his door. Every time we tried to help him he would get angry and try to punch us. He got into his apartment, closed and locked the door, and we heard him collapse on the ground on the other side. We called the non-emergency line wondering if this guy had alcohol poisoning or if he had drove home. No one was with him, so we had no idea how he got back home, and he seemed drunk enough for it to be bad. Non-emergency came out and banged on the door for a good while before the drunk guy managed to unlock it, and I heard an ambulance come and they took the drunk man to the hospital. I received a call from the police the next day saying he had to be hospitalized and his stomach pumped because of alcohol poisoning. Me and that other guy probably saved his life by helping him and getting him taken to a hospital. However, they also found a gun on this man. He was a criminal and not supposed to own a firearm and definitely did not have a permit to carry it around. He came back with it on him from wherever he was drinking. The cops said it was probably a good thing he was as drunk as he was because he forgot he had a gun on him. So he was throwing sloppy punches instead of pulling a gun on us when he was consistently angry at us through the encounter. I definitely could have died that night. TV picture froze. Loud buzz. And a loud voice screamed, "I hate you," and then "I'll kill you." It sounded like a woman whose local cords were tearing from how hard she was yelling it. Then the TV reset. I forgot to turn the gas off on my stove and the sparker wasn't working, so I was letting carbon monoxide fill the house. If my mom has been there about an hour later, I probably would have died. Long story short, I was 20, around 1 a.m. I saw someone outside my windows walking all around my house trying to get in. My kitchen window was open, screen intact, but I was about 15 feet off the ground, so it was the safest place in case they climbed in a window. Started smelling gasoline. Cops show up very quickly. and caught my soon-to-be ex-husband, who I had a DVP order on at the time, throwing gasoline all around my house. He was caught and sent to jail for, basically, attempted arson. After that, I bucked up and eventually became a pro boxer. Started a job as a correctional officer at the state penitentiary and was given self-defense classes by the same men that give classes to Secret Service agents. I'm nobody's punching bag anymore. I lived in a heavily haunted house. It was a large house and I had 9 roommates. So there was always the sound of people walking around on different levels, opening and closing doors, and talking. It wasn't until I was alone in the house for the first time that I noticed you could hear walking around, opening and closing doors, and talking even when there was no one there. I went down to the basement to play the piano and had a very strong feeling of someone telling me to fuck off. For someone who has never experienced this, just imagine you are in a room with someone who is angry as hell and is screaming and throwing things at the walls. Then just subtract the sound and images. The feeling is the same. I thought I should say something out loud, so I said, "I'm sorry I bothered you. I'll leave now because I respect you as a roommate." It was when I said the word roommate that the feeling stopped and things got very calm. I went back upstairs to my room, feeling very shaky. Maybe I should mention this was probably 2 or 3 a.m. So getting out of the house and going somewhere wasn't really an option. I was sitting in my bed for about 20 minutes when I saw something on my wall. The best way to describe it would be to say that it wasn't visible per se, but looked sort of like when the Predator in Predator has its invisibility turned on. It was shaped like a 3-foot-long salamander. It crawled down my wall and up onto my bed and then disappeared. The townhouse I lived in had a skylight. Earlier that day there was a hailstorm that had cracked several skylights in the complex. That night I'm home alone watching the news. They start talking about a burglar who has been breaking into homes through skylights. 5 minutes later I see a flashlight shine at my skylight and hear someone on the roof. I freak the F out and call 911. I'm full panicking. Locked in the bathroom on the phone with the police. My husband came home to tell me the maintenance man was on the roof checking the skylights for cracks from the storm. Had to call 911 back to explain that the maintenance guy was a dick and didn't bother to tell me he was going to be on the roof. I live alone, and I'm a young small female. For context, I went on a run, and ordered a juice on Postmates in hopes it would arrive before I did. Unfortunately, no, it was late. Oh well. I decide to shower as I wait. While I'm in the shower, somebody knocks on the bathroom door. I freak the fuck out, grab my clothes and run out. My order was there. I accidentally left the front door unlocked. The guy went into my house and knocked on the bathroom door. Sorry for format, I'm on mobile. This isn't like some of the other ones here, but I didn't realize until pretty recently that it was actually traumatizing. This was when I, 28F, was 18. I just finished my first year of college and had moved back in with my parents for the summer. My childhood home was right by the city and close to a subdivision, but also surrounded by fields and isolated with only one neighbor, family member, that was not directly beside us. I had slept in until around noon, and was about to take a shower. I heard a man's voice yell excitedly, which threw me off since I knew I was home alone. I figured my dad must have been home still, so I went downstairs in my towel and started calling out, "Dad." I never got an answer, and couldn't find my dad, so I dropped it. A few days later my mom found a broken window in our basement. Our guess is that at least 2 dudes tried to break in, since I heard one of them call to the other, and that they must have left when they heard me and realized the house wasn't empty. I did not hear the window break at all. If I hadn't heard them talk, then 2 men could have come into my home while I was in the shower and I'd have no idea. The fact I didn't hear the window break from upstairs kept me up until 6 a.m. every morning until I moved back out for college. A recent story, just a few months ago. Okay, I live in a small, safe neighborhood. My dad drives around a lot for work, so I only see him Saturday morning through Sunday afternoon. This happened on a Friday, so my friend, let's call him Zach, comes over to spend the night. We had a history project, but it was nearly done, so it only took an hour or so and we got the rest of the night to goof around. My mom comes in around 9 and says that she has to run to the town 30 minutes away to grab something. We say it's fine and she just tells us to listen for my siblings. So we're just sitting on my bed playing on my Xbox and talking, when we hear something at my window which leads to the backyard. Weird, but I have dogs, so whatever. It continued here and there for the next 5-ish minutes, and we finally decide to pull open the blinds. A guy was laying down, bleeding right below my fucking window. We freak out and call my mom. She comes back. Sure as hell there he is. We call the cops. He gets taken in an ambulance. Few days later, we find out he was a homeless drug user who had gotten into a fight. The sound was him struggling to stand and open my window. This will probably only be understood by people with an evangelical Christian background. I was probably 8 years old. I fell asleep on my bed reading my Garfield books, and unbeknownst to me, my mother had stepped out of the house for a second. I woke up in an empty house, thought the rapture happened and that I had gotten left behind. I was terrified. I had been up for days binging my way through an ounce of coke, and was getting paranoid and seeing shadows. Keep looking out the window. One time I looked out the window around 4 a.m. and my yard was full of cops. Holy shit, did I ever freak out. flushing empty bags, throwing dirty mirrors and spoons into the sink, flinging needles into the attic to hide them. In a full-blown panic, but there was never a knock. I look out again a few minutes later and they had moved on to the neighbor's yard, then kept going. To this day I have no idea WTF they were doing, but holy shit will that fear stay with me. A couple hours later I did 5 more lines, then fell asleep 10 minutes later from exhaustion. I also quit coke after that. 3 a.m. Watching the house while my parents were on vacation. Neighbor up the street cruises up to the house of another neighbor he doesn't like, and throws a pipe bomb into their yard.